Hey everybody, welcome to another Telescope Hangout. Let me just check if the sound is coming through all right. Okay, I'll just wait a couple minutes until everybody can see this. Okay, cool. So let's get started. Hi everybody. Today I'm going to talk about SimpleSchema and how Telescope uses SimpleSchema and Autoform. Sorry. Yeah, if you join the Hangout, by the way, please mute yourself. Sorry. And I apologize for the really dark picture, but if I open the curtain, it's going to be really, really hot here very soon. So yeah, it will be a little bit dark. But it doesn't matter anyway, because I'm going to share my screen most of the time. So let's do this right now. OK. So first of all, SimpleSchema. So SimpleSchema is a package by Eric or Aldid. And it's quickly become the most common way to define a schema and to set up models in your Meteor app. Because out of the box, Meteor doesn't really have any concept of models, although there are collections. But collections don't really contain any logic. They're just a way to store your data. So SimpleSchema can add all that validation logic, as well as doing things like defining default values, so defining types. And it can do a lot. And it's especially interesting because it works very well with Autoform, which takes the schema you defined for your collection and then generates forms. So insert forms, update forms for your documents. And not only does it generate the form fields and the layout and all of that, but it also generates all the logic required to make these fields work. So Telescope is basically architectured around both SimpleSchema and Autoform, and we're going to talk about this today. So first of all, well, this is Telescope. And when you want to post something, you have a list of properties. So this is an example of a form generated by Autoform. And Autoform actually has a couple modes. Like, you can use it in a couple ways. One way to use it is just specify the field yourself and then let Autoform handle the logic. Another way you can do it is use Autoform's quick form, which is what I'm doing here, where it basically takes the schema and generates the markup for you. And you can also have Autoform generate the markup, but not handle the logic. So you can use a method for your actual post submission, which is what we're doing here. So there's there's two levels of control. You can let Autoform handle the markup or not, and you can let it handle the logic or not. In Telescope's case, it handles the markup, but not the logic. You might be wondering why. Well, the reason why it handles the markup is so that you can dynamically insert more fields. So for example, this thumbnail URL field is not hard-coded. It's inserted by the embedly package. Same with the categories field. It's not in core, but it's inserted by the categories package. So since the whole form is generated dynamically, you can add, remove, insert fields at once. And the logic, well, although you can get Autoform to just take care of all of that for you, for Telescope, I felt it was safer to call a method, which is let me find it for you. For example, edit post for the edit post form, or submit post for the submit post form. So Autoform lets you do that, and then the method takes care of checks like rate limiting, whether or not the user actually has the rights to modify each property, and so on. So this gives you a little bit more granular control, which is actually really cool. Like it's really cool that Autoform lets you kind of plug in your own logic wherever you want to. Okay, so that's for the overview of SimpleSchema and Autoform, kind of in general. And let me go back to the Hangout to see if there are any questions about this so far. Okay, so people are saying you couldn't see any code. Well, no, I guess it doesn't matter too much for what I said so far. But for the next part, it would be good if you guys can see the code. So let me try sharing my screen again. And this time, let me know if it works. Yeah, just let me know in the chat room if you can see the screen. Like, it should have a weird mirror effect where you just see the Hangout window mirrored to infinity. Or the Crowdcast window now. Okay, seems like it's working now. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's kind of hard to both like talk about the code and monitor the chat room at the same time. Can only see my avatar. Okay, let's try and work this out first before we move on. So try one more time. If that doesn't work, I guess I'll restart the Hangout. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So, okay, if there are no questions for now, I'll just move on. So I just talked about SimpleSchema and Autoform. I talked a little bit about how it's used, in the actual app. But now let's see how it works behind the scenes. So this is the posts.js file where I define the post schema. And it looks pretty normal. That's what you would have in any app that uses SimpleSchema. So you define the fields, their type, and their extra properties, like whether or not they're optional. But Telescope has a few extra properties. So actually, what will be interesting is seeing where those extra properties are defined. So let me go back a little bit to the base, the lib package. Yeah, okay, right here. So as you can see here, SimpleSchema.extend options. I'm defining a few extra properties that are not like native to SimpleSchema. And I'll go through them in detail later as we encounter them. But quickly, I just wanted to point out that you you're actually not limited to what SimpleSchema gives you out of the box. You can kind of customize it pretty easily. So that's pretty cool. So for example, one of these properties is the editable by property, which takes an array of strings. And as you can see, you can either, well, not have this property at all, or it can be set to admin or a member and admin. So basically, if the property is not set at all, the property in the field will not be editable. So created that, the timestamp as which the post has been created, that's not something you want to be editable by anybody, basically, because that would, you want to be able to trust that this property hasn't changed since the time the post was created in the first place. On the other hand, post to that is the time where the post actually appeared on the site. So an admin might want to modify that, if you want to schedule posts in the future or for whatever reason. But a regular user shouldn't be able to change this. They shouldn't be able to mess with the timing of their post and maybe, bring it back on the home page when even if it's old. So this is something only the admin should be able to edit, and that's what we're doing here. Finally, something like the URL. Well, obviously, the member should be able to edit it because that's how they submit a post in the first place. And the admin should be able to change it as well. So by the way, when this editable by property is both for inserting and editing content. We just assume that anything that the user can insert, they can also edit it, and the other way around. So the idea behind this is that the schema should kind of aggregate all the logic of your app, or as much as possible of that logic, so you don't have to hunt through your code to understand how things work. So this is a good example. For example, this editable by thing, it controls not only who can actually edit the data, but also which form fields should be displayed to which class of user, right? So these are two kind of very different things, because one is about the server-side validation, the other is about client-side markup, which fields are rendered or not, but they both relate to the same property on the schema. Okay, so well, how is this defined? Well, if we scroll down to our allow and deny code right here, you can see it's really simple. What it does, so that this partial thing here is underscore. It's a way of partially applying a function. So the allow check function takes actually 2 arguments. Or let me check. Okay, no, sorry, it takes 5 arguments, but it will be partially applied with this one pre-filled. So the collection argument will be pre-filled with posts, and that's what we're going to use for our allow callback. So if you follow my blogging on Discover Me here, you know that I'm not a super big fan of allow and deny, but kind of as a proof of concept, in Telescope, I've left it in there, even though it's not strictly speaking necessary, because as you'll see later, most of the work is done by methods. But as a proof of concept, I wanted to see if I could come up with an implementation that's simple and secure at the same time. So so far, it seems like it is secure. Hopefully, people won't find exploits, but I thought it was an interesting thing to work on. So what does this allow check function do? Well, it basically relies on this thing right here, schema.getEditable fields on user. So what this does is, for any given user, it retrieves a list of fields that are editable by this user. And I think you can see right away how this will be very useful, because this is how, just based on these properties, along with the user's own user class. So whether or not they're an admin, whether or not they are they have an account, and so on. You can retrieve a list of allowed fields and then reuse it throughout your code. And get editable fields method is right here. I'm not going to go in details right now, but basically, yeah, it looks at the fields, it looks at their editable by property, and it compares that using this this other method right here. Users can edit field, which takes a user and a field, and then it basically says yes or no. So this is how this allow check uses get editable fields in an allow and deny for posts. Let me see if there are any questions so far. So yeah, Yusuf is asking why there is no allow for insert, and that's because allows are done through a method. So yeah, again, even though editing is also done through a method, it does have that added layer of allow and deny. One reason, as I said, was as a proof of concept. The other reason is sometimes you want to maybe have something where you're just modifying one property. It's not a great example because it's also done through a method. But for example, if you wanted to just upvote a post and that would only increase the score property, for example, well, then maybe it would be nice to have a general allow and deny for update so you don't have to write another method. Again, it's more proof of concept. It's not that useful in Telescope right now, at least. I'll deal with the other questions at the end, I think. For now, I'll move on to the other ways that this get editable fields method can be used in Telescope. So as I said, most of the work in Telescope is actually done through methods, such as this one here, submit post. And again, here you have users can submit field on a user and a field, which maybe I can show you this one. Okay, submit field. So you have it right here. So it checks if this field's editable by property contains admin, and if users is an admin, or it checks if it contains the member field, and if the user is a member, which basically member just means regular users. So any regular user can submit a property which is editable by members, but then for the the edit field check is basically the same as the submit field. So I hope this is not too confusing. It's kind of a lot to take in, but hopefully you can come back later and kind of look at the code. One thing to note is that doesn't check if the user actually owns the document. For example, here, we're only checking if the user has permissions for a field, not a document. So there's both aspects, right? So if I'm editing a URL, well, of course, users can edit URLs on posts, but at the same time, they can only edit URLs on their own posts, right? Whereas admins can edit URLs on any post. So I think it's kind of a good idea to view both these checks as separate things, So there's like the permission level of the field and the permission access of the document. So again, this is only concerned with fields, not documents. Yeah, so let's go back to our method. So there's also for like editing. there's also some code that checks that the user owns the document. I'm not going to go into too much detail on like methods today. Maybe that's worth doing a separate episode. But I basically wanted to show you that methods use edit field, which goes back to the schema, just like the allow and deny also was based on the schema. Another place where the schema is used is templates. So for example, this is the post submit template, which uses quick form. So quick form, before I was talking about how Autoform can automatically generate your markup for you. And this is what the quick form helper does. Takes a bunch of fields and then lays them out in a nice form. In this case, the fields are specified here through this post fields helper, which is here. And again, we have our get editable fields method on the SimpleSchema prototype, actually. So yeah, this is the same thing we used before to, let me find it. Yeah, this is the same thing we used before for our allow and deny method to get which fields are should be editable or not. So it's the same get editable fields method, and it's used for figuring out which fields should be in the submit form, submit post form, sorry, and the post edit form as well, if I can find it. Yeah, again, get editable fields. So yeah, this is what I wanted to show you. Like you have one single schema where you specify this editable by property, and then you just reuse that wherever you can in your app. So in order not to duplicate logic, basically, because otherwise you have if we did this like the dumb way with like separate logic in our templates, in our methods, you could end up with fields that are in the template but are not actually editable by in the method, or the other way around, like fields that are editable in the method but not in the template, and it would be a mess. This way we keep everything smooth and logical. So any questions so far on what I just covered? Again, like I'm conscious that this is probably a little bit confusing or a lot to take in, but it's more about the general idea of aggregating logic in the schema and not spreading it throughout your app. If you can understand that, I think I've done a good job already. OK, so far I've talked a lot about SimpleSchema. Now let's talk about Autoform a little bit. So yeah, if we go actually to the Telescope documentation, there's this custom fields section right here, which talks about how you can add fields or remove fields to the schema and in turn to the form. So that the syntax is pretty simple. The field schema part is actually all SimpleSchema definition, and then you also have a field name property just to set the name. So it's a very light wrapper around the SimpleSchema's own functionality. So let me close these because we're not going to cover them again. And yeah, so here's the add field function. Basically, all it does is right here, attach the field to the collections schema. Pretty simple. The only difference is it can take an array of fields. So if you want to simplify your syntax a little bit, so that's why there's some logic to kind of make that work. Other than that, it's basically the attach schema method. You can also remove a field, which is right here. So the way it works is also with attach schema, except you're basically passing the whole schema with that one field removed and then replacing the current schema with that. So that's how you remove a field. What else do we have? So allow check, we covered that. I'll talk about this later. But for now, yeah, I want to talk about these extra properties that I showed earlier. So here in that file, you remember how I said that we're defining these extra properties? So let's go over them briefly. Editable by, so I talked about that earlier. Private, so well, then it gets a little bit messy because different collections have different fields or different extra properties, rather. So private is something that's currently implemented for the settings collection only. And because when you're filling out the settings form, there's fields like, for example, your Kadira app secret, and obviously you don't want to publish that to the client. So if you set this to private, you know that it's never going to get published to regular users, but it will get published to admins who have access to the settings form. Order, if you want to control the order in which the field will appear. This is actually something that could maybe be brought back into Autoform itself, because I don't think it exists. And it's really simple. So if you specify an order, there's just there's some code in here, right here, that just sorts all the fields by this order property when you call get editable fields. So you know that the forms are always going to be displayed in the same order, and you can easily switch it around if you want to. And then we have some properties that are specific to the user collection. So the user collection is also managed through SimpleSchema and Autoform, because even though the user object is created automatically, well, users, when you sign in, basically, users do have these profile edit forms, which again are generated by Autoform. So that's why they need a schema. And so required, a really common issue with like Twitter or Facebook login is that they don't give you the user's email. So Telescope needs an email to send notifications and so on. So the email is marked as required, which means that after somebody logs in, there will be an extra step where they're asked to enter their email before they can continue on to using the app. And what's pretty cool, so maybe I can show you right now. I'll just open a new incognito window. Let me just find a Twitter account I can use. Probably, pretty sure I haven't used this one before. Okay, right here, this is the that required property. Adds the email field to the screen, and I'm actually going to give you a live demo of how this works. If I go to your users schema, but say that the bio is required as well. Wait a little bit. Reload. Yep. The bio is now required, so we get asked for it before we can move on. So this is the power of SimpleSchema and Autoform, right? you're controlling the whole app's logic and the schema, and then that reflects in the actual forms and the behavior of the app, basically. Okay. So what else do we have? Public. So this is where we get into. Actually, let me go back to the chat room to check for questions, just to make sure that everything makes sense so far. Okay, yeah, don't be shy about just leaving me a message in the chat room just to tell me that it makes sense, because otherwise I'm not sure if I'm just talking for myself or if people are actually getting that. Because this is not something I've actually explained to anybody else before in that much detail. So, and I actually haven't seen it in other apps that much. So yeah, it might be my own crazy idea. Hopefully it makes sense. So we've talked about required, public. So this is where we get into publications, because there's kind of two aspects to security or you could say data management in an app, right? There's what users can edit, which we've talked about with editable by, and then there's what users can read or just see, and that's controlled by publications. So although publications right now are more or less hard-coded in Telescope, I've started transitioning that to a schema-based pattern, just like editable by. And I've done that with the user schema with that public property. So if we go, users right here, let's find one. Okay, ID is public, or website, all these are public. And in our publication code right here, you can see that the fields to be published are these ones, users.pub/sub.public properties, which gets defined here. And just like before we had get editable fields, well, now we have get public fields right here in our collections.js file. It's really similar. It just looks at the at that public field and only returns fields for where that public property rather is true. So right now this only is implemented for users. Posts, comments, get all their properties published, and then settings has the private thing, which kind of works the other way. So that's probably a bit confusing and should be kind of harmonized between both. But anyway, that's how it works right now. It's still a work in progress, I guess. So that's for public. And then profile is another thing that's specific to users. If I go back to my profile right here, you can see that the name, for example, appears here. And let's say I fill in a bio. It will appear as well. But then if I set the bio to, okay. Okay. Oh, sorry, yeah, HTML bio, because it's HTML. A quick note that Markdown fields always have two fields. So you get post or body and HTML body, bio and HTML bio, just for security reasons. So once I remove bio from appearing in the profile, it doesn't appear in the profile anymore. Another one that's interesting is Twitter username. Okay, and now if I look at my profile, not only is my username here, but it's actually linked up to Twitter. And well, how did I do this? Because these other fields just display a string, basically. So how did I display a link? Well, this is where this property comes in, the template property. So you can pass, just for this specific use case of showing fields in the profile, you can pass a template that will be used to display the field. So Twitter, has this template, user profile Twitter, and that's all it does. So in this case, this will be the value of the field, and then it automatically adds the link to Twitter. So it's a really tiny use case, right? It's only used in this, user profile page. But the reason I find this interesting is it's kind of a new way to use SimpleSchema and Autoform. So the basic way is using Autoform for forms, right? But actually, why not use it to render your actual data, right? So if you want to render a user profile, you could also base it on the schema and just iterate over the schema using Autoform or something really similar, and then spit out the markup. Maybe in the future, even posts could be rendered this way, where as soon as you add a new field, it just appears in the post because it's all rendered dynamically. So of course, for something like post, it's a little bit trickier because there's kind of this layout and where would you add the next field. But it's not it's not impossible. If you add a little bit of CSS, you could definitely make it work. And right now it's not supported by Autoform. There's it's still a bit early, but in the future I could see I could see Telescope being rendered that way, where everything is really even more modular. In fact, comments could be rendered that way as well. Like you could, let's say you want to add a star rating field. Right now, you would add it to the form with SimpleSchema, so the star rating would pop in here. But it would be even cooler, right, if it could just appear in the comment itself automatically. So something to think about for the future. Sorry. Yeah, so that's about what I wanted to talk about today. Just give you an overview of how things fit together in Telescope, and the possibilities that are opened by Autoform and things like itself. I think it's Telescope is a bit special because it's open source, so it needs to be easily modifiable. So that informs a lot of decisions. But yeah, I do think this pattern can still be useful for any even closed source app, because as soon as it reaches a certain size, well, the time you'll gain by just being able to add a field to the schema and have it pop in automatically everywhere, I think it is worth investing the effort to do it. So yeah, sorry, I'm gonna put on the AC because it's getting really hot here. Sorry for the noise. Yeah, summer in Japan is pretty tough sometimes. So let me answer a couple of questions. So Yusuf is asking about hooks. Hooks are not really dependent on the schema. Yeah, they're kind of a separate thing. So unless you have like a question about hooks specifically about the schema, I'll probably do another hangout for that. Is there an easy way to remove the title and just show the field? I'm not sure which field. So maybe you can add more precision about that. Other questions. Can you show an example of how to join collections using SimpleSchema? SimpleSchema doesn't really have any mechanisms for joins. So yeah, post, for example, have a user ID field, which in MySQL you would join. That's there's nothing built in for that. Like you have your user ID and then you look up your post or whatever by user ID. If you need to have like up votes or down votes, well, you just use nested properties. So yeah, there's not a good way to do that, especially if unless I'm not getting the question. So feel free to add to that later. We'd like to hear about the possibility to post a poll on Telescope. Yeah, you could add. So yeah, one thing I didn't show is that Autoform supports custom field types. Sorry. So for example, there's a URL field type that's just a regular text input field, except that it automatically adds the HTTP / part if it's missing. There's like a date picker where you click and you get the date picker. So you could add a custom poll field, for example, and you star rating. That's something else. File upload, Google Maps. You can basically add anything you can think of. You can probably make it into an Autoform custom field and then just insert it wherever you need it. Can you show an example of custom validation using SimpleSchema, including displaying error messages? So don't think I'm using any custom validation in Telescope. I just used stock error messages, or it's like inside a method where there's like the method has its own logic and its own error messages. So I do think it's something I could do better. There's probably lots of custom validations that could be put in the schema and not in the method. But at this point, it's just something I haven't had time to do yet. Can you give us an example of how we can improve a related schema? I'm not sure what you mean by related schema. Like, one thing I am using is a sub schema. So for example, a user object has a telescope property that contains all telescope-specific properties. And I call that schema user data. So it's defined here. I think this is probably better than just doing like a black box object where you don't specify any schema, because this gives you, again, validation and structure, and then you're able to generate your forms with quick form and so on. So I don't know if that's what you meant, but that's what I'm doing in Telescope. And finally, is Autoform safe against XSS? Probably. Like, this is typically something that I leave to the package. So I trust that Eric knows what he's doing, and he's taken measures to like validate the forms and ensure against XSS. One thing you do want to pay attention to, which isn't really dependent on Autoform, is just whenever you permit like HTML or even Markdown, if you want to basically display a form as HTML and the code can be executed, then you really want to sanitize it. And yeah, that's not Autoform's job. That's up to you. So which is why, as I was saying earlier, like posts like the bio have two fields. Fields like bio have two. Yeah, it's confusing because there's field has two meanings. Like there's this, I guess I should call them properties. So fields that you fill in like bio have two properties, a bio and HTML bio, just to ensure that the raw content that people enter into the site, which is bio, is never just displayed as is to the user. That's HTML bio. Anyway, that's also probably another topic. So yeah, again, I don't know how any of that, if any of that was clear or understandable, but hopefully this gives you like a base to understand what I'm going for in Telescope and maybe explore on your own further. So yeah, thanks for dropping by. And yeah, we'll do more of these. Hopefully every week. If there's other topics that you want to hear about, let me know. Just come by the Slack chat room at slack.telescopeapp.org and suggest topics. Otherwise, I'll just pick something, maybe methods, maybe, who knows. There's certainly a lot to talk about in Telescope. Thanks, and see you soon.